Did you know that Indonesia is on a quest for a new capital, David
What?
Morton? That's right. We learn all about that in this month's World article. But why is Indonesia changing things up?
Well, from what I understand, a big reason for why they need to change is just because their current capital of Jakarta is really crowded, very polluted, and it's just running out of space.
Yeah, right. And so they're changing things up, moving to another area of Indonesia, and looks like they're going to have to basically build that capital city. Obviously, I assume that's talking about a lot of government buildings and so forth, and so that will take a lot of work. But that could, be exciting for people to kind of see this new capital and maybe give Jakarta a little bit more room to breathe, right?
Yeah, and it's really quite interesting because you think about cities. Most of the biggest cities in the world are places that have been around for a long time, right? They started off as obviously smaller areas, right? But as people moved there and as it gained popularity, it became more and more of a spot until now you have these mega cities like Tokyo and New York City and stuff like that. But to build a new city from the ground up is something that I don't think has really been done, in very many places.
Right, there's a few other places mentioned where they've done this, but it's only been less than a handful, I think. So, but what do you think the pros and cons are of doing this, of moving capitals?
Well, one of the cons, obviously, is the fact that they're trying to move kind of the base of their operations, you know what I mean? All their government stuff, they're trying to move that to a totally new location, which I think bureaucratically will be potentially a nightmare. But one of the pros, though, is that they're trying to move it to a more central location.
Sure.
And Indonesia is a nation made up of thousands, tens of thousands, or even more of little islands. So having a more centrally located capital could potentially help out some of the more economically, struggling parts of the island to have more exposure and more income.
All right, good, David. Well, what about you? Where do you prefer to live? Do you like living in a large city, or would you rather live in a small town or even a rural area?
I've always been a little interestingly split about this, you know what I mean, in kind of interesting way. Because on one hand, I love to live in really big cities like Taipei. I like being surrounded by all these different stories, you know what I mean, and just the energy of it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I really also like being out in the middle of nowhere every now and then. So I think that living in a cozy part of a large city and having the option to go out to the rural areas is nice.
It's a good in-between, right?
Yeah.
I know I've done both. I grew up in the countryside, but now I live in a big city, and there are definitely pros to both, right? And you have the convenience of the city, and you have the peace and quiet of the countryside. So
right.
The countryside is a good place to retire. Yeah?
It is. And hey, I grew up in the country too, so I feel like, but you were more country than I was.
That's right. It was pretty rural. Well, we hope that you enjoy this World article. Be sure to check out the entire article in this month's Advanced Magazine.